Something unusual is unfolding across the global battery supply chain. For years, China held near total dominance over the processing of lithium, nickel, cobalt, and the critical metals that power the world's electric future. But now, almost completely under the radar, two democratic resource superpowers are forming a new strategic bloc that could reshape everything. Canada, home to some of the world's purest nickel deposits, and Australia, the undisputed giant of lithium production, are quietly merging their strengths into a $19 billion battery metals partnership designed to challenge Beijing's grip on the sector. And the early numbers make one thing clear. This shift is already underway. Welcome to Geocapitalist, where we break down the alliances, resources, and strategic decisions quietly reshaping global power. This story sits at the crossroads of energy transition, economic security, and geopolitical competition. And once again, Canada is emerging at the center of a shift few analysts saw coming. In this video, we examine Australia and Canada's $19 billion battery bloc, an alliance quietly reshaping global supply chains and challenging China's long-standing advantage. Subscribe for clear analysis on geopolitics, critical minerals, and how alliances like this are rewriting the battery map. Now let's begin. To understand how we got here, we first need to ask a fundamental question: why battery metals became the world's new geopolitical battleground? The global competition for battery metals did not emerge overnight. It began slowly as electric vehicles shifted from a niche experiment into the backbone of future transportation. Governments realized that whoever controlled lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and the processing capacity behind them would ultimately guide the direction of the world's energy transition. For decades, these materials were treated like ordinary commodities, fluctuating with industrial demand. But by the early 2020s, they had become instruments of national strategy. Countries started securing long-term supply, negotiating exclusive partnerships, and even redesigning their industrial policies around them. China moved first and fast, building a near monopoly over processing and midstream refining, turning raw materials into a geopolitical lever. As Western nations woke up to this imbalance, they discovered a structural weakness: enormous demand, insufficient domestic production, and almost no refining capacity. This vulnerability forced a strategic pivot. Nations needed democratic, reliable partners with large, high-quality reserves. And in that search, Canada and Australia stood out as natural, complementary anchors for a new global battery metals architecture. Now, to understand why Canada sits at the center of this emerging battery alliance, we need to examine the country's most strategic advantage: nickel. Canada's position in the battery supply chain begins with a resource that has quietly shaped industrial development for over a century: nickel. But not all nickel is created equal, and this is where Canada's strategic advantage becomes undeniable. The country produces some of the world's highest-grade Class 1 nickel, the type required for advanced battery chemistries used in long-range electric vehicles. This purity isn't just a technical detail, it determines energy density, durability, and overall battery performance. As automakers pushed toward premium EV lines, demand for Class 1 nickel increased dramatically. Canada's deposits in Ontario, Manitoba, and Newfoundland suddenly became central assets in North America's industrial future. Proximity to the United States strengthened that importance even further. American companies seeking reliable, non-disruptive supply chains increasingly turned to Canada, bypassing the risk-laden routes that pass through less stable jurisdictions. With supportive government policies, new investments, and processing expansions underway, Canada was no longer just a mining nation. It was becoming a pillar of the Western Battery Corridor, offering quality, reliability, and geopolitical stability that no competitor could easily match. While Canada anchors the nickel frontier, Australia commands the global stage through lithium, a resource the world cannot electrify without. Australia produces nearly half of all mined lithium worldwide, an extraordinary share that gives it unmatched influence over the upstream segment of the industry. Its deposits are abundant, concentrated, and supported by some of the world's most efficient mining operations. But production alone does not tell the full story. Australia's lithium sector is deeply integrated with technological partners, allowing rapid scaling and consistent quality. For years, much of this lithium flowed directly to Chinese processors, reinforcing Beijing's midstream dominance. But geopolitical shifts, rising supply chain scrutiny, and new partnerships have begun redirecting that flow toward allied democracies. Australia recognized that lithium was no longer a simple export commodity. It was a strategic instrument that could help shape the global energy transition. The country's stability, transparency, and investment climate turned it into the preferred supplier for nations seeking to reduce their dependence on China. And as battery demand accelerates, Australia's upstream leadership has become more essential than ever. To understand the importance of the Canada-Australia battery bloc, one must examine the existing structure built over decades. China's dominance does not come from owning the most deposits, but from controlling the refining, processing, and chemical conversion that transform raw materials into battery-ready components. This midstream power became the fulcrum of global production. Nations could mine as much as they wanted, but without processing, they were still dependent on Chinese facilities. This arrangement seemed efficient until geopolitical tensions, trade restrictions, and supply vulnerabilities exposed its fragility. Automakers faced delays, governments confronted strategic risk, and investors began demanding diversified supply chains. The shift wasn't ideological, it was practical. The world needed redundancy, resilience, and partners aligned with transparent governance. The pandemic further accelerated this awakening, revealing how concentrated supply chains could halt entire industries. Countries sought alternatives that preserved both economic continuity and political alignment. In that search, Canada and Australia emerged not just as resource suppliers, but as pillars capable of supporting a non-Chinese battery ecosystem that could match scale with reliability. With Canada's nickel and Australia's lithium firmly established, the next question becomes unavoidable. How did these two strengths converge into a $19 billion strategic bloc? The $19 billion figure attached to this emerging alliance represents more than investments. It reflects a coordinated vision shared across governments, companies, and financial institutions. Canada's nickel producers and Australian lithium giants began aligning their supply contracts, exploring joint ventures, and securing long-term agreements with automakers in North America, Europe, and parts of Asia. Government initiatives accelerated that process by offering incentives for processing facilities, electric vehicle supply corridors, and cleaner refining technologies. Mark Carney's influence in Canadian economic planning added momentum, emphasizing the importance of secure, democratic mineral partnerships. Meanwhile, Australia strengthened ties with both Canadian companies and Western automakers, positioning itself as a reliable pillar of upstream supply. The result was a network of interconnected projects that collectively approached $19 billion in value. This wasn't a single deal, but an emerging ecosystem, one where nickel, lithium, and midstream processing formed an integrated chain. As these investments matured, the Canada-Australia bloc shifted from concept to reality, offering the first meaningful challenge to China's long-standing dominance in the global battery sector. The significance of the Canada-Australia alliance extends far beyond their borders. The United States, recognizing the urgency of securing non-Chinese battery supply, incorporated Canada as an essential partner in its critical mineral strategy. Canada's Class 1 nickel and growing processing capabilities aligned perfectly with U.S. targets for domestic EV manufacturing. Meanwhile, Australia's lithium integrated seamlessly into American supply networks, allowing downstream industries to reduce exposure to geopolitical uncertainty. Europe, facing its own energy vulnerabilities, sought stable partnerships to meet aggressive electrification mandates. The European Union viewed Canada and Australia as dependable sources rooted in democratic governance and environmental standards. This alignment of interests created a trilateral dynamic. Canada provided the nickel, Australia delivered the lithium, and the United States and Europe supplied technological scaling and industrial demand. Together, they formed the backbone of a Western-aligned supply chain capable of competing globally. The battery metals bloc was no longer bilateral. It had become a structural pillar in the energy strategies of the world's most advanced economies. Behind the geopolitical headlines, the impact of this partnership is felt most profoundly in local communities and industrial centers. In Canada, mining towns long accustomed to the cyclical nature of resource markets are witnessing a resurgence of optimism. Investments in exploration, cleaner extraction technologies, and upgraded facilities are creating new jobs and revitalizing regional economies. Processing facilities near major transportation corridors are expanding to meet rising demand from North American automakers. In Australia, export hubs along the western coast are experiencing similar momentum, supported by growing lithium shipments and downstream collaboration with global battery producers. This increased activity strengthens infrastructure, boosts local employment, and reinforces Australia's role as a cornerstone of clean energy supply. Meanwhile, electric vehicle manufacturers benefit from greater supply security, improved material quality, and reduced exposure to unstable markets. Consumers ultimately gain as supply chains stabilize and production scales more efficiently. What began as a strategic alignment between two nations is now reshaping the economic landscape for thousands of workers whose livelihoods depend on a resilient, future-ready industry. The emergence of a Canada-Australia battery bloc represents more than a commercial realignment. It marks a turning point in the global energy transition. Over the next decade, demand for batteries will expand at a pace unmatched by any modern industrial sector. Nations will compete for resources, processing capabilities, and secure partners that can sustain long-term growth. In this environment, Canada and Australia offer something extraordinarily valuable: reliability anchored in democratic values, world-class resource quality, and a shared commitment to transparent governance. Their synergy creates a diversified supply chain capable of supporting North America and Europe as they scale electric transportation, renewable storage, and advanced manufacturing. As processing capabilities grow within allied nations, dependence on single-nation dominance will diminish, reducing systemic risk. This realignment does not erase competition, but it introduces balance into a sector that desperately needed it. The next decade will reveal how transformative this shift truly is, yet the early signs point to a future where Canada and Australia stand at the center of a more stable, resilient global battery ecosystem. Canada and Australia didn't set out to rewrite the global battery map, yet through shared strengths and strategic alignment, they have created one of the most significant mineral partnerships of our time. As nations race toward electrification, this alliance offers a blueprint for resilient, democratic supply chains, and the world is beginning to notice. If you gained clarity today, I invite you to watch the next video. And if you value clear analysis of the forces shaping tomorrow's geopolitical map, subscribe to Geo Capitalist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.